Hello, Wolfpack. If you haven't been living under a rock, Bitcoin's dropped down below the range-bound construction it was seeing for the last month since December 4th. And we've dropped down below 45.5k into a region that is pretty much unmarked territory. I mean, at least for the last, let's see, at least since September, so the last 4 months. And so this is pretty worrying for a lot of people in the market. And what I will say is you should be worried. That said, I don't think that it's just going to keep dropping into oblivion and it's going to go down forever. That's not what I've said at all, right? I think that looking at the 4-hourly chart, we can see that this range-bound construction was a very negative thing, which typically isn't what happens during kind of consolidation in the bottom of the range. And that's why I said, and you would have seen yesterday, by the way, guys, I mean, I don't want to over-promote myself, but it is kind of a business at the end of the day. And so, I said yesterday in my last YouTube video and the one before that as well, buy Bitcoin. We were sitting in the 45k region, high 45k, as I said. Buy Bitcoin, sell at 47k. We touched 47k exactly, dropped straight down and dropped below. So that's an easy little scalp trade there with a very minimal risk that played out perfectly. But what we've seen on Bitcoin is a drop below that support zone, which is obviously very kind of disturbing for some people, considering that was the region in which a lot of people would have said, hey, Bitcoin's going to bottom out here because, this is the bottom. We're going to see a double bottom formation. I brought up the theory of a double bottom formation multiple times. I thought it was viable, right? I didn't think there was anything overly wrong with it, but I did say on multiple occasions as well. And these are my exact words from a few videos. I said that during this double bottom formation, I said it's pretty much 50-50 at this point. But what I did say is if we do see a double bottom formation, I think it will be a dead cat bounce rather than a full recovery, right? I have not once since this region here, right, since I made my pinned video, you can go check out my YouTube channel, said that I think we're going to be seeing a full recovery. I don't think it's possible at this point. I think the bull market is over. I think at most we will see a dead cat bounce, but I think we will see a dead cat bounce, right? We can't continue this downwards trend forever. If we just went straight down all the way down to my prediction of 25k or to 30k, yeah, it's not going to look natural. But what we can look into just before we get into the video is my original prediction. My original prediction was largely based off the weekly chart here and the 50-week SMA in relation to the 20-week, 200-week SMA. And that correlation or that relation is the fact that every time we lose the 50-week SMA historically on Bitcoin, and you can look back for history, I'm not going to do it in this video, it'll take too long, but every single time we lose the 50-week while we're in a bull market, we end up at the 200-week within about a year. In this scenario, we lost the 50-week for the first time in early December, and so the next logical step would be to end up at the 200-week, which would probably be around 25k, somewhere like that, right? 25k in that region there next December, or this December, sorry, because it's 2022. So December this year, December, November, somewhere in Q4, right? That's what I'm expecting. Ultimately, my longer term prediction is we'll end up at the 200-week SMA in that region. So yeah, I think the overall trend is downwards, but that's not to say that we can't have a rally, right? We're going to have a rally at some point, and it might even be substantial, right? It might even take us back up to 52k. Who knows, right? But as of right now, the longer term trend is downwards, and I'm just looking for scalp trades at this point. Now, as for the current correction, what we can do is we can look at the volume. And the volume is very important. I've been looking at volume a lot recently. Volume gives you a really good indicator of how strong trends are. And what we can see is 4 consecutive red days with rising volume on each day. And so the trend is very strongly to the downside right now. And that's not a good sign. It means there's a lot of selling pressure on Bitcoin. I understand that selling pressure can't keep up forever at the same rate. And that's why I think we could be seeing a bounce, even potentially right here. I think that as for at least today, I think the bottom is in, at least for today, right? As for the next week, who knows? But I think that, we could potentially be coming down on a larger scale, right? In the next week or two, we could definitely be coming down to the region of around the 40k support. We're looking at 40k to 42k. That's a major support block there, and we can just draw that in. That red box there is kind of what we're looking at. Actually, matter of fact, before we draw anything like that, I want to take a moment to delete everything we have here, because all of this is getting substantially irrelevant from the current price action. Deleting it all, fresh chart, we can start fresh here on Bitcoin and kind of get a fresh perspective and see what's going on now. All right, what I am seeing on Bitcoin in the short term. You know what my longer term view is. It's always going to be that until invalidated. My longer term view is that we're going down. What is going to happen in the short to medium term? Well, I can see a pretty clear support box between around 40, just below 43k and just above 40k. That is a pretty clear support box for Bitcoin. I think that from that region, we will see a bounce of some sort. Now, what I have said previously is that if we do come down to this box, right? We do come down to this box and we see a bounce from here like that. That is a very clear head and shoulders pattern, and I actually do think that scenario is quite likely. In fact, that is my favorite scenario at this point. I don't think that we're going to drop straight through this box, nor do I think we're going to recover from this box. I think that the next logical step for Bitcoin is potentially come down a little bit further into this box, deeper into this green box, and bounce and see a dead cat formation, right, and a head and shoulders formation, and then drop down further into the 30k region when we're heading into Q2, right? So I think that the entirety of Q1, to be honest, but again, this is a medium-term prediction. On a larger-term scale, it doesn't really matter, right? Larger-term scale, I'm bearish in the market. I think we're in a bear market. But on a medium-term scale, I think from what I'm seeing right now, the next logical move is maybe a little bit more downside, and then a head and shoulders pattern, and then a drop down into the high 30k region coming into March or something like that. I think that the rest of January and at least the predominant part of February is going to be spent in basically a consolidation / slight upwards trend, and then we're going to crash down, right? But that's honestly, that's just a speculation. Would I bet on that happening? No, I wouldn't, right? The reason why I think that might happen is because we do have coming into kind of long-term bullish divergence in the RSI. We have, pretty much primed for a bullish MACD cross at some point within the next couple of weeks, and stochastic RSI is bottoming out, of course. We're also considerably below basically every single dynamic support zone we have, on the daily chart. Literally every single one, actually. And when you see overextensions to the downside for long periods of time, like we've had here, you usually do see a rally and we take back some of them, but ultimately it does lead to rejections. However, I think that there is going to be some sort of rally coming, and I think that this is probably coming towards a good time to have that dead cat bounce that we've desperately kind of not hoped for, but desperately kind of predicted for on Bitcoin. We're going to see a dead cat bounce at some point, and I think the most logical place to see it is 43k to 40k, right, stemming from that point. Look, there's a lot to kind of dissect when it comes to, at what point would I be getting back into the market? There's not really a good point. I think that the structure is largely broken. I really don't see a scenario in which we see a full recovery here on Bitcoin naturally, right? What I will say is that 53k, as you can see here by the September top and the bull market support band, is a major resistance area that we will need to be conquering in order to have any bullish structure. If we see a typical dead cat bounce formation, we would expect it to top out at 53k because that is the height of the last shoulder. So if we do bounce off 40k to 43k, we'd expect to come all the way up to 53k, and from that point we'd be rejecting from both the bull market support band and also the line here that we've just drawn from the other left shoulder and September high. So if we get above 53k convincingly, that could be a great sign for Bitcoin. So we're looking at above 53k for any kind of sign of bullishness. But until that point, doesn't look too good at all. We have to also note that 48k is a kind of major support, major resistance that we've been rejected from multiple times. So we'll label out 48k and we'll label out 53k, and we'll leave those lines there because those are the very critical zones, and we'll leave those in blue here, and we'll spread out that support line here, and then we can draw in a couple more things on Bitcoin. Let me make these lines a bit smaller so they're less prominent. A couple more things on Bitcoin that are important is this downtrending line here that I'm going to draw on Bitcoin from the last previous high in April all the way through the top of September, and we were kind of riding the bottom here in this correction here in December, and you can see we've dropped below that line on Bitcoin, which is obviously not the best sign. We can also draw another support line here on Bitcoin like that, something like that, and we've actually just closed the daily candle below that region as well. But we'll leave these two lines in here because they're both kind of very important lines to be looking at on Bitcoin. We can draw one more line from the November top here coming through these wicks here, and we can see that this one although on a very sharp descent, has actually held for support. And we've actually come, if you line it up perfectly like I've just done, we've actually wicked just right on top of it, and it's held for support, and we've bounced back up very, very slightly. So those are the three critical lines that I'm looking at, these red lines that I'll leave on the charts here. Let me just fix these up a little bit so I can leave them on without any worries. These are the three lines, the three major red support lines, kind of diagonal support lines and resistance lines that I'm looking at on Bitcoin, right? Let me decrease the size of all of this stuff so we can get a better point of view. And then we're going to hop into, right after this, the 3-day chart on Bitcoin and what's going on there. We're also going to hop into, before we hop into the 3-day chart, the VVPR, the volume profile on the daily chart. Let's go ahead and bring that up right now and see what the volume profile is telling us. Sorry, I just need to close one of these indicators here. And we can see what the volume profile is telling us. Now, for those of you who don't know, the volume profile is essentially an indicator that measures or kind of tells you where all the historical trading volume is from periods of time, right? Historical price action. So we can see, for example, this red line that's just popped up is called the point of control, and that is sitting at 47.2 K, and that means that the most historical trading volume has happened on this visible chart here. The most historical trading volume has happened at 47.2 K, and hence, since we are below that now, it means it's acting as resistance. What we can see on the VVPR is we're coming towards a crevice, right? And this goes into my prediction that I said before. I think that we bottom out in this green box here, and the volume profile would suggest that bottoming out is going to happen at exactly 42K on the crevice on the VVPR. Because the VVPR, if you're at a crevice, you've basically reset, right? I like to think of it like a mountain, right? If you're at the bottom of a mountain, which is where you would typically slide if you roll down it, running up either side is going to be very hard. If you're running up a hill here, it's going to be very slow and hard. If you're running up a hill here, it's going to be very slow and hard. Whereas if you're at the top of the mountain, right, top of the VVPR, falling down the mountain is going to be very quick, like we saw in this recent daily candle where we dropped, very, very, very quickly just in the last 24 hours. That's because we started at the top of the VPR and we ended up in the crevice. And I think that naturally we're going to roll down to around 42K before the bottoming out. I think 42K is going to be the kind of area in which we see that head and shoulders pattern. We've already kind of touched 42K a little bit, which means it could potentially be starting already, but I think that the market needs to calm down for at least a couple of days before we get kicking off there. So that's the volume profile, and it's suggesting that on the upside, obviously 47.2K is the major resistance, and that obviously comes pretty close to 48K, which is our short-term major resistance that we've rejected from countless times. So anywhere in that 48K to 47K region is our first major step to reclaim any kind of structure in the market here on Bitcoin. As for the weekly chart, as we've just looked at, we can bring up the RSI, the MACD, and the stochastic RSI. We can see that the stochastic RSI has bottomed out quite nicely on the weekly chart. However, it is worth noting that stochastic RSI is kind of unreliable a little bit. It should be used as supporting evidence, not just the only conclusive piece of evidence in an argument. The MACD is primed for a cross, but then again, those crosses can take literally months to play out in the weekly chart, even up to 6 months. And so it's nothing really worth considering overly. What we will say about the weekly chart, in addition to losing the 50-week SMA, which is very bearish on the longer term scale, is the fact that on the counter argument, right, the counter side is that the Ichimoku cloud has been holding for support for 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks, right? We can see the cloud has actually dipped down a little bit here, and we've come down on a wick, and we've actually wicked off of that and held it for support even further. So closing a weekly candle within the Ichimoku cloud would be a further death sentence for Bitcoin. Right now, we've got basically life in jail, and closing it below the Ichimoku or within the Ichimoku would be a death sentence, right? Because whenever you close a candle, especially on the weekly chart within that Ichimoku cloud, it continues in the direction it entered from, right? If you close it from the bottom, enter like that, it's going to continue through. If you close from the top, it's going to continue through, right? So it would be, and that's going into what I was saying about the daily chart, it would be an interesting place and probably a likely place to see a small kind of head and shoulders pattern here before actually dropping below. I think that's the most likely scenario. As for the 3-day chart, what we can see on the 3-day chart is that this long-term 3-day support line on the RSI is still holding. It's been holding since November 2018. We're still holding that in the RSI, which is good to see, which would be another thing that suggests the shorter term bottom might be in at least for the next month or so, or at least close to being in, right, at 42K. Now, 15-minute chart, not really much to talk about there. But I wanted to bring up one more thing, and that was the similarities that I'm still seeing between the May to July period and current price action. If we bring up a fractal from May to July, which was this long consolidation period after a sharp downwards trend, which is kind of a similar thing to what we're seeing right now, we can see, if I bring this fractal right next to it, I'll make it a bright color here so you guys can see it quite clearly. We can see the similarities are, absolutely uncanny to a certain extent, right? We can see that we had 1, 2, 3 little peaks. I'll zoom in a little bit so you guys can see. We've had 3 little peaks. Same thing happened in May to July. Let's remove the VPR. 1, 2, 3. We saw a larger topping formation. We dropped back down and had some chop, right? Dropped back down and had some chop. The only difference would be the close of this daily candle has been significantly lower, right? This last one we've just had on Bitcoin has been significantly lower than any kind of close we had in previous kind of trends here in May to July. Now, do I think there's still a possibility that we could be seeing a May to July? Yes, I do, and I think that's the only bullish possibility here. But even with that said, I think that if we do see another May to July, which I think we could be seeing, that doesn't mean we need to bounce all the way up to all-time highs, right? It could just further support the theory that I've kind of created here that we could be seeing a head and shoulders pattern, right? A little bounce up and a little head and shoulders pattern before crashing further. So ultimately, guys, the predictions we've made since 66 to 63k, they're all playing out perfectly. A longer-term scale is still bearish. I will say that the longer this drop persists, the longer this drop continues, in the short term, and it just kind of heads straight down, the more likely we'll just see a dead cat bounce. And I think, obviously, the logical place for us to see that is this green box here. I think we're going to see a dead cat bounce that's going to last. Well, what we can do is we can actually just take a fractal from September to see how long it's going to last, right? It's probably going to last, if we do see it, until March, right? Until March, if it happens right now. So basically, you're looking at about a month and a half to 2 months of kind of a little bit of a rounding formation like the next short would be. And I think that a lot of people are going to flip back to bullish when that happens. They're going to think, oh, the market's recovering, it's all good. And a lot of people are going to get caught out. And that's going to be the catalyst that brings us the extra selling momentum that we need in order to reach our lower targets. Because right now, sellers are going to get exhausted quite quickly, especially heading into major support. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one.